This is Michelle Wong here for another episode of the Sacred Emergence podcast. So, I have a beautiful interview with Elizabeth Sargent. And before I share with you our interview segment, I just wanted to give you a heads up that there is a little bit of background noise. I recorded this on the balcony because it was such a beautiful day. But there are some birds and there's some kids' voices in the background that I couldn't edit out. So just wanted to give you a heads up. And with being international, sometimes the Wi-Fi gets a little bit spotty. So there's a little bit of that as well. But the information and the interview with Liz is incredible. So I know that you will enjoy it. So without further ado, here is the interview. Amazing. Welcome to the show, everybody. Today I have a beautiful guest with us, Elizabeth Sargent from the UK. Elizabeth is an amazing functional nutritionist that specializes with women's health. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you, Michelle. Excited to be here.
Yeah. And so just to give listeners a head up, I'm actually recording this outside on my balcony in Bali. So there's sounds of birds outside. So that's what you're hearing if you're hearing like this, like, oh my goodness. So Elizabeth, is it okay if I call you Liz on the show?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, so I love your work. We've connected over Figure 6 and even working with human design and all of that. But one of the aspects I love is that you're really sharing with women how to really come back into their bodies and paying attention to their own body's rhythm. And I love the courses that you offer because I think I saw one on your Instagram is about journaling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear more about how you started with your journey in women's health.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my journey specifically into women's health has been interesting actually, because I guess it's been something that's been with me for 20 years or so, just from the aspect of my own journey with health and with connection with self. But my journey with kind of really working with other women probably started around eight years ago now, when I moved from my corporate career, which was in big pharma. So I was working at that time actually in autoimmune conditions in big pharma, and I deployed my skill set into nutrition. So I then went on, did a master's in human nutrition and continued with functional medicine training as well on top of that. And that gave me the opportunity to then obviously work a lot more closely aligned with the women who are in my world now. And I think before that, I enjoyed that corporate role, but I knew I was very much disconnected from myself when I was in that role. And it's very interesting when I came out of it and now when I reflect back, how my life was very much two parts. So I had fun, silly Liz at home, and then I had corporate Liz, who was, climbing the corporate ladder, basically just very different in the work environment. And I'd found this extremely draining over time. And I'd also seen kind of, for me, where that amazing career ladder was going, which was incredible. And I often think, now over 10 years on, where would I be? Which country would I be living in? Which country business unit would I be leading, or something like that? It's just kind of crazy. But I knew that wasn't the path for me. And a lot of the women that I work with, I can resonate with, and they resonate with my journey, because so much of where I've been is right from being at school, being a high achiever, doing all the things, kind of very much go, joining all the different clubs, all the different activities, absolutely loving life, going on all the adventures. And then I think the work that I do is very much around female health, our energetics, so our physical energetics, and then our hormones. And that very much mirrors my experience of life. So having glandular fever in my teens. I lost my dad when I was 18, basically went to university the next week and managed to kind of squish down all those emotions that I probably should have expressed and grieved, and very much carried that with me through my very busy 20s, living life in London, building my career, moving and living abroad in Chicago for a period of time with work, and just continuing, then finding CrossFit and living like this incredible busy life, but your body just can't keep up with that.
Mm.
And over time, as I see a lot of the women that I work with, my resilience massively dipped to the extent I had HPA axis dysfunction, which I had adrenal fatigue. It's not called adrenal fatigue anymore, but back at the time it was very generally called adrenal fatigue. And that was then this big shift for me. Now, at the time I was training for my in functional medicine at the time. So I was really lucky because before that I hadn't even heard of what a HP axis is, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. I didn't know what adrenal dysfunction was, and I wouldn't have spotted the symptoms. But because I was in that field now, I was able to spot it and intervene quite early. But for me, that required a massive identity shift because I had to stop doing my 6:30 CrossFit class and started walking and meditating, which, as you can imagine, for someone who was very fast, and kind of always wanting to achieve, always wanted to get better, get stronger, that was a massive identity shift. So that was kind of like that was my journey through starting to tune into my body and listen to my body, because these clues my body had been giving me had been there for years, even from being a teenager. So when I was a teen, and obviously our hormones are a bit funky as a teen, as the communication channels are starting to find their way. But I had really horrendous acne as a teen. And so I went on the pill very early. I came off the pill in my 20s. The acne all came back, not surprisingly, of what I know now. Of course it's going to. Um, and so then it was, this, these last, I guess, 10 years, well, probably before, not at the moment, but the last 10 years have definitely been my own personal kind of reconnection with self, understanding my hormonal systems, my energetic systems. A lot of that has been rebuilding those. And yeah, that's so much now what I do with the ladies I work with, very much on the physical human side, but also the human being, the self side. It's all part and parcel.
I love that. That is so interesting. Like, I'm wondering what some of your symptoms were when you were like doing CrossFit and basically being in the masculine go, go, go mode. I'm wondering what symptoms you had that you realized, oh, this is like signs of adrenal fatigue, which is a different name now, but yeah.
Sometimes I say, well, let's pause on jumping into the Dutch test. Let's get all of those foundational things in place first. Then when we go to the Dutch test, if we need to, because actually for a lot of women, when we get those foundational things in place, I would really struggle with blood glucose control. So I had horrendous sugar cravings. And then I would just crash in the afternoon. I'd be absolutely exhausted. And how this then sort of started to manifest, it was I would do my workout at home, breakfast, and then within half an hour, I would be just flattened. I felt horrendous for the rest of the day. On the days when I perhaps wasn't working out, I found it very difficult to concentrate. I had very low mood. If I had a coffee, which I didn't drink that much coffee, but I would think, all right, I just need something to make, like, kind of give me a bit of a pep up, which so many ladies do. I would actually find that made the scattiness in my brain so much more kind of all over the place, which was really difficult because I was obviously studying for my thesis in functional medicine at the time. So writing and doing all the work and doing the research for that was just sitting there, not create any thoughts. And then mood. So I had very low mood, sort of just generally. And I think looking back, you could probably describe that as kind of very depressive type mood as well. So they were the symptoms that were coming, which were very unlike me, because I was very, quite high energy, and I was just really struggling at the time.
Oh, wow. So it was almost like even with all of the exercises you were doing afterwards, you were just like blah. And
Yes.
like, yeah, it's so interesting because like even like you were saying about coffee, because like most people, especially when I was in corporate, it was like the 2 p.m., let's grab the coffee, right? I need a little pick me up. Okay. And then you with those, so how long were you experiencing that before you realized, oh, this is not normal?
Well, when it got to that stage, there that became more of the warning signs. But I would have been experiencing it for long before there. So I remember there'd be times when there was one particular time. This was when I was still in my corporate role. I went to the cash machine to get cash out, and I withdrew £30, took my card, and then just walked off without the money. Like I just wasn't
Mm,
present in myself, and my mind. So there'd been lots of things before getting to there, and that was just obviously that sort of, and also I guess symptoms of poor blood glucose control that would have been going on for a little while. The feelings of being hangry, not being
yeah.
satiated,
Satiated?
um, satiated. Thank you. It's early here. It's early, um, and yeah, and the other interesting thing actually for me, I think like one of the final things that the final straws that broke the camel's back for me was the CrossFit being a positive stressor, but actually very stressful for me at that particular time. Not that I realized it, but also I was eating really well. And when I say really well, I was like eating really clean, but I
Mm,
was probably eating too clean in for the amount of exercise I was doing. Even though I'm really aware of what exercise I was doing. So I was eating, the good quality carbohydrates, but I wasn't, for where my body was from a stress perspective, I wasn't taking that into account. So I think that as well would have been contributing to what's going on. The other thing that happened for me is that I lost my cycles. So
oh, okay. Wow, there's so much to like. I have so many questions. That is so interesting. Well, oh wow. So like because we like we're taught like not we're taught, but like eating clean is kind of like the thing. So I'm curious, what do you mean when you were saying how it wasn't enough or it was too clean?
yeah, so I would say I was too low carbohydrate. So I was eating
Oh,
all good whole foods. And I think at that particular point, I had probably cut out pretty much all refined carbohydrates and sugars. So I was purely on like whole food sources of carbohydrates, but I probably hadn't included as much because it's very easy when you do make that shift, even though I was obviously very aware of that space, um, to just go very low carb. And I wouldn't say I was low carb, but I was low compared to I was. So with that, I had quite a big body composition change. Um, so I imagine some of that will have contributed to things, particularly from a hormonal perspective. Um, and what was interesting with losing my period is I was also taking the pill whilst, again, at that time, I did not have the full spectrum of information at my fingertips as the I would have made very different choices whether I was taking the pill or not. But at the time, I was taking the pill, and I lost my period despite being on the pill. So actually, it was my pill-free weeks, so the withdrawal bleeds that stopped, which
mm.
retrospectively was quite alarming. So that would have been a big telltale sign that those, even despite having the pill, the estrogen and progesterone levels really weren't where they needed to be.
Let's talk about the pill. And like because it's like I feel like not like it's I mean it's easy. Well, not easy
Hmm.
because you still have to like take it every day. Uh, so you have to like but like the effects of it on our body, right, as a woman.
Mm,
And I know it tends to be overprescribed for things that aren't like you were saying for acne. And I know that even if it's not the pill, like the IUD, so like women's hormonal birth control, that makes me so wary. Like I actually have
mhm.
never taken it because just the effects that I read about and how it actually can numb. or turn off a woman's intuition with her own body. So I'd love to hear more about your perspective with that and what you typically, how you navigate people with that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, first you have to choose, if it's for contraceptive reasons, you have to obviously choose the one that's right for you. So I'm not against the pill because it has to be the woman's choice. What I am advocating for is informed choice.
Mm.
So when you take the pill or you take one of the hormonal coils, you have the opportunity to understand fully the effects of what that synthetic hormone is, how that may affect your body, and some of the maybe longer term effects of choosing it. And then you've had an informed choice. What I believe is that a lot of women are just automatically say prescribed it, but they don't they aren't given that information. And often it's overprescribed for exactly like you say, so for acne, heavy periods, painful periods, other female health conditions such as endometriosis or fibroids. And these are all conditions as to when we're able to tune into our body, listen, they lift really quickly when we make holistic changes.
Mm.
So we are led to know, particularly in the Western world, that heavy periods, painful periods, low mood swings, anxiety at different points in our cycle are normal. It's just part of PMS. It's part of being a woman. We just have to live with it. It's not the case at all. It is absolutely not the case. PMS in some cultures doesn't even exist.
What?
It's
Oh
a
my God.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't even exist in some cultures. It's 100%, well, I wouldn't say necessarily 100%. There's obviously a small amount of genetics behind your susceptibility to these things, but so much of our genetics is switched on by our environment.
Mm.
So when it comes to all of these hormonal imbalances, it comes down to that holistic approach, and we can lift all of those symptoms really quickly. So before going or whilst being on any of these hormonal contraceptives for that particular reason, think, how do I want to tune into my body? Because all they do is mask the imbalances that are going on under kind of underneath the surface. And the amazing thing for us women is we have this finely tuned hormonal system that's often called a fifth vital sign. So we have this finely tuned system that's linked to all of our other bodily systems. So if something isn't right, if we're having heavy periods, if we're having painful periods, if we're having period pain, if we're having sore boobs, we've got acne, if we're having low mood, that's just our body saying, hey, can you just listen to us? Something isn't right. And can you still sort of step in? But we ignore that because we believe that is normal, but it's not, it's just common. So what we need to do is listen to those, and rather than just mask it with a pill, is just make some very easy shifts in our diet, in our lifestyle, to give our body what it needs. And then those, I see in the women that I work with, those symptoms lift in a month, like in one cycle. They have significant improvements in those symptoms by making, actually, for in some cases, quite simple dietary changes.
Wow. Because I get cramps. I get low mood. Sometimes my boobs get tender. And it's just like every month I'm always holding my breath.
Mm.
So, and I feel like I've done like sleep cycle in the past, kind of not 100%. So I love that you're like, it's only a few tweaks. I'm like, oh, really? I just feel like sometimes like I gotta do all of this in order to shift it, when really sometimes I had to say like an Advil can kick the problem. But I love, like, with what you're saying, it's we are going to the root cause and we're giving our body what it needs when we're willing to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we do listen, because what we want to do is make sure this amazing cyclical hormonal system is working to its optimal, because when that's working to its optimal, the rest of our body will be working well. Our digestive
Mm.
system will be working well. Our stress system will be working well. Our neurobiology will be working optimally. There's so many different, our immune system, all of our systems are so interlinked, but our hormonal systems, our estrogen, our progesterone, testosterone, and all the other hormones, they they talk to each other. They talk to all the different cells in our body. We have estrogen receptors in our brain, So our brain chemistry is very much linked with what's going on with our hormones. So actually just tuning in and taking some time to understand ourselves and then responding to that with what our body is saying is really powerful. It's there to see us for the long term, because this is our home, our body is our home. So let's, just really tune into it and get to know it really well. But from my perspective, I'm kind of slightly gutted. It took me to my late 30s to actually come around to this. So it's now my mission. It's like just to bring awareness to women at any point in their life, but ideally as early as possible, so that they can actually start to feel more empowered around their body rather than disempowered, and in some cases quite, shamed about some of the hormonal changes in their body.
Yeah, I can see where, like, with the pain and just like all of the symptoms that you were describing earlier, it can make a woman distrust her body. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that's that connection between our physical human and our inner being, sort of ourself. And that's where we become disconnected. But when we do, and this is a really simple way, and even if someone is on the pill and they're listening to this, like I am on hormonal contraceptive, just tracking and attuning to your body on a daily basis, just tracking, how do I feel today? What can I feel within me? How does my mind feel? How does my body feel? What symptoms am I having? What thoughts am I feeling? Just tracking that is the first way just to start attuning and connecting physical self with sort of inner being. So and that's then when you can start looking at patterns, and then it gets quite interesting because your body does go through patterns, and this is particularly true, say, a lot of women who go through into their luteal phase, that's the second half of your cycle, that's when a lot of those symptoms come up for women, either in the later half, or for some women it could be for the kind of nearly 10 days, 2 weeks. But being aware of that, and when you start just attuning and knowing that that might be coming up, you can start actually making plans around the social events that you plan, the activities you do at work. It's probably not the best time of the month to plan a work presentation or an inspirational leadership meeting as you're approaching that part of your cycle. Whereas when at the first half of your cycle, you're all inspired and you're feeling great and you're like, yes, let's do this, launch this new idea, let's set a date in the diary, brilliant, put in the diary about 2 weeks time. What phase are you going to be in then? How are you going to be feeling then? So even just firstly attuning to your physical self and your inner being, and then starting to map out, well, how do I lead myself for success on a day-to-day basis, a month-to-month basis, with just your home life, your social life, your personal life, and also your work life.
Oh, I love that. So with your programs, how do you, like, what are your offerings where you really help women kind of track that and understand that and map it to their diet and their lifestyle?
So I have a membership that's called FemFlow. And FemFlow actually used to be a program. So it's actually set up where you can first come into the membership and actually could consume all the content. There's about £500 worth of content there, because it's all around attuning to your cycle and harmonizing your hormones. So it takes you through all the videos and the workshops to go through that. And then it takes you to optimizing, because once we've found that harmony, we can use these hormonal balances to optimize. So like our brain chemistry, our metabolism changes at different times in our cycle. The workouts that we do, they should be changing on a day-to-day basis. We shouldn't be doing the same workout day in, day out, because our female bodies are not designed to do that. We can optimize our fitness by attuning to that. So we then, so that's optimization. And then for those ladies, and there's been ladies who have been with me for a number of years, who have come through some of my other programs, have come into FemFlow, and now they're kind of really in that embody phase where they're kind of like journaling, with their cycle, they're eating in sync with their cycle, because there are different foods we can eat at different times of the month that will help balance a lot of these symptoms. So FemFlow is really where it's a low-cost monthly membership, and I'm excited to be able to deliver this now, because it makes it so much accessible to to so many women. And then I'm always hopping in there and talking about whatever's coming up, doing Q&As, doing hormone hot seat sessions. It's just this beautiful environment where I get to hang out with women who are also wanting to get into this space, wanting to attune to themselves, and obviously those women who are already there along on their journey, which, from a selfish perspective is amazing.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that you call it the hormone hot seat.
Yeah, hormone hot seat sessions. Come with all those hormone questions, wins and woes, and we'll jam out on them.
Oh, I love that. And how about like with menopause or even like perimenopause? Like, is there wisdom to that as well with respect to foods and
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. That's an amazing question. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm always encouraging women who are in their late 30s and 40s to come into FemFlow, or to at least start attuning at this point, because this is going to be the foundation to set you up going into perimenopause and then into, that sort of real kind of more intense and moving into menopause itself. Because when you start attuning, when you start understanding how your body reacts to different environmental and lifestyle aspects, and different foods, you're going to be so much better prepared for the hormonal changes, for navigating them, for understanding what to do for yourself. So FemFlow helps women find that flow. And we're in the process of, actually, one of the ladies on my team is a sort of a menopause specialist, and we're in the process of really building out the menopause stream of FemFlow. And actually, we have some workshops coming up in October. It's going to be October, all around that transition towards menopause, so perimenopause, managing the symptoms, because so much of that can be managed hugely holistically with diet, lifestyle, and stress. Connection with self at this point in life is so vitally important. And I think and when I chat to Caroline, the women on the team, we also kind of geek out on this so much. But for so many of the women coming in at this point, when you're in your 40s, or either early 40s or late 40s, depending on when the symptoms start coming up for you, you're at a time in your life where you've got successful careers or successful businesses, you've got a family. Some may have young children, because a lot of women are having children later in life. Some may have teenagers, parents are getting older. So we've got so much responsibility, so many balls we are juggling, and so much stress and everything that we're carrying at this point. And there's so much kind of lack of focus on self. And that, for so many women, is kind of the thing that's buffering them out of alignment. And when we go into perimenopause, it's like, bam, whoa, what's just hit me? Because then you've got all these internal things that are changing, and they're things that are more kind of seem more difficult to control, because they're not things you can see, they're not things you can speak to and move and juggle. It's like, whoa, what's going on? But when we've found these foundations and we understand how we can, I don't want to say juggle our hormones, but tune into them and actually nourish them in the right direction, it becomes a lot more powerful.
I love that. So it's focusing on it, on just understanding your hormonal cycle now is going to obviously support you down the road when you're going to go through that, the menopause. Yeah, it's interesting. I never even thought about looking into what's happening in someone's lifestyle with kids and parents getting older, and that does affect our body's system and stress and all of that. So I love that you incorporate that as well. I have a question. This is kind of off tangent, but not really. With soy, because I hear so many people fearing soy, and I eat soy. And some people avoid it, and I'm just so curious what your take on it is.
Yeah, so soy is really interesting. So the thing with soy, you want to be looking at good quality soy products. So really organic and non-GMO. So one of the challenges with soy products is that because it's such a commodity food, and it's so mass produced to make oils, to put in the most random of foods. And I think in the US, more so than perhaps over here in Europe, but it's definitely, if you look on a loaf of regular supermarket bread, a lot of them will have soy in it, but it kind of used as a stabilizer and all those sort of things. So because it's produced for that reason, it's like massive agricultural product. So it's massively it's usually been bred or genetically modified to be resistant to various pesticides, so that you can mass spray them, mass grow them in these crops. Now, the challenge with that is that soy can be disruptive to the gut, and it's more to do with the fact that it's not the traditional plant that we would have eaten however many. It's very similar to wheat as well. A lot of people have gluten and wheat intolerances. The wheat that we eat now is very different to what our ancestors would have eaten. And when we eat it now, often that molecule of, say, gluten in wheat, or the protein in soy, will be connected to some other things. It'll be connected to whatever it's been produced with. It'll be connected with maybe some organophosphates, so some like small amount of pesticide residue or whatever it is, and so our body doesn't recognize it. So that's what in our gut is then causing like an immune reaction, and our body's like, hang on, this isn't the gluten or the soy protein that I'm used to. What's going on? It causes that. So there's that part of it where it can cause gut disruption. And then from a hormonal perspective, and an endocrine system. So if you're choosing good quality soy, if you're choosing fermented soy products as well, they can actually be really helpful for different times in your cycle and as you go into perimenopause. But as with anything, it's just choosing the good quality, because soy contains a lot of phytoestrogens. So when you're in, say, a part of your menstrual cycle, particularly when you're in that second half of your luteal phase, so probably the week before you have your period and also during your period, your estrogen levels are going to be at their lowest. Now, this depends. Obviously, some people have something called estrogen dominance. When you have estrogen dominance, that's when you have a lot of the symptoms that I was talking about earlier. So we need to obviously tune into what's going on. But soy and the phytoestrogens can be very helpful at that time in the month. And also going into perimenopause, when you're experiencing low estrogen, adding in soy products can really help lift symptoms for some women.
So it needs to be like good quality, organic, non-GMO. Okay, well, that's good to know. Because like I've heard mixed reviews on it, and people are like, oh, it's bad for you because it's like mimics estrogen, and it's just like, but I've heard practitioners saying, no, it's actually good for you. And it's just like confusing. So I appreciate your take on it.
Yeah, it's also, again, to tune into what symptoms you've got. So if you've got a lot of estrogen dominant symptoms, when your estrogen levels are too high for your compared to your progesterone, first of all, you need to sort of tune in again to feel, are my progesterone levels too low? For a lot of women who have got chronic stress over a prolonged period of time, the progesterone levels are going to be low, whereas some women are inefficient at detoxifying estrogen, so their estrogen levels are just too high because they're not excreting it. Their circulating estrogen is high, in which case soy may make that worse.
Okay.
So it is all about kind of just tuning in. But as long as you're having, good quality soy products, it, for some women can be helpful. And also just being true how much you're having, like anything, if you're drinking soy milk every single day, or if you're, and again, the thing is trying to have most whole food sources of soy. So like the fermented, say, tofu or edamame beans, they're going to be the best sources to go through versus the highly processed things like soy milk. I just mentioned soy milk, but if you're having that, occasionally in a coffee or in a tea, then that's fine. But if you're having a lot, then it's just sort of tuning in, is this serving you? It might be absolutely fine, but is it serving you? And how does it make you feel?
Awesome. And like, how about like functional medicine testing? Like, do you, I know there's like all these different like with functional medicine, it gets very like specific and even more articulate with like what is being detected.
Mm.
And so I'm curious, like, do you find that, especially, let's just say for like hormonal, what you recommend and like if you guide your clients through that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I love testing, absolutely. And for me, it very much depends on where the client is and what they're into, because there's a lot we can do with symptoms without doing any testing.
Okay.
So some women come to me and they're like, I want to know all the information about me right now. And then, like, right, okay, let's have a look. We can look. So some of the foundational ones would be looking at stools tests. So your gut health is going to be the foundational thing. And whatever other tests you do, quite often it will come back to what's going on with your gut, what's going on with your gut permeability, the activation of the immune system, as well as that incredible ecology of those bacteria, the yeast, what is going on in that place, because that is kind of the control center of your body, really. So that's kind of like that foundational piece. Then we have something called the Dutch test, which is really looking at what's going on with your hormones, what's going on potentially with stress profile, depending on which Dutch test you go for, and excretion. So that's really important for your detoxification. So how efficient are you at detoxifying estrogen? Where are your different levels of progesterone, estrogen, and all the different androgens that we have within us? All the symptoms, they lift really quickly. And it might be that we do something like Dutch test really just to kind of get into some of the nuances, and so we know exactly what's happening with some of the systems. Because like you say, the functional testing we have now, you can get into such like biochemical pathway specifics, which is absolutely fascinating. So you can really sort of support yourself through that. And I'm actually in the process of doing a whole load of different testing on myself, which I'm very geeky and excited about to see what the results are. But yeah, so functional testing is amazing, but it's also you can either jump in, which is great, or you can say, okay, let's get these foundational pieces in place first and then see where we need to go when, kind of like when the clouds have lifted, because
Mm,
then you have a more stable view of where you are.
I love that because then it's like, I think sometimes the testing can be a little intimidating and it can be possibly like cost prohibitive. But just to say, like, okay, let's just look at the foundation. Maybe like, what's your lifestyle like? What's your current diet? What are some
Yeah.
of your current symptoms and what can we do to tweak it? I feel like that's like, oh, okay, like let's just start there and see what shifts. I like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. And there's some women that I do, depending on where they're at. There's quite a few women that I do blood glucose monitoring with. So understanding, how different foods affect your blood glucose, and that basically affects the level of inflammation, um,
Mm,
what's going on a daily basis. And that in itself is really informative, and it's very empowering because you can see the different foods and the different combinations of foods that you're eating, how your body is responding and reacting to those really quickly. And it's kind of like that real-time feedback. So testing can be as simple as getting a blood glucose monitor off Amazon, which may cost £20, and then just taking your blood sugars for a couple of weeks, making tweaks, and then coming back to it a month later and then seeing where you're at, and then looking at like alongside the symptoms and the change in the symptoms as a result of that. So it can be really, really, for those that like to get into a bit of nitty gritty and start to understand themselves more at that kind of cellular level, there's really simple things we can do as well.
oh, amazing. I love that. I love like it's very like it depends on where the person wants to go with it and you don't have to start at one particular place. So it's really customizable. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, how can people work with you and learn more about you and get to know you more?
Yay. Well, I come and befriend me on Facebook, send me a note, say, hey, I'm listening to you on Michelle's podcast. Um, and I'm on there, just Elizabeth Sargent. I'm also over on Instagram at Nourished Club. So that's my business name. And yeah, I have FemFlow, which is the monthly membership. And I also have Flourish, which is all around energetics. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about at the
Mm.
moment, talking about energetics, and that's very much our physical human energetics. So for me, it's about making you feel as good as possible, as quickly as possible. So that's really around lifting that energy from that perspective. So then we can then connect to self. Then we also move through some of the energetics with regards to self as well through that.
Is that
And that's a
sorry, go ahead. I was just going to
yeah,
ask.
that's a 6-week program. So that's a
Okay.
6-week program. The next one will be starting in September. And then I have my mastermind, which is Opal. So that's the beautiful combination of one-to-one support as well as being in that group environment, as you know, so you kind of get that momentum of the group, but the deep dives with the one-to-one. So that's my mastermind Opal. And obviously I do one-to-one as well. But a lot of the women in my world are kind of in those group environments, because you get, you know, you can dip in and out of them as much as possible, but as you desire, but you get that extra momentum.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Liz. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And I love just hearing your story. And it just seems like even talking to you in our, 45 minutes together, it just feels like, oh, it's like, it's not like a death sentence. It's
No.
like any of the symptoms, especially with cramps, and it could be so debilitating sometimes for some women, that it's like, oh, there's actually like a solution that isn't
Yeah,
like trying to figure out what's wrong with me. It's just simple tweaks.
absolutely. It could just be simple tweaks. If you're at a level where sort of the cramps are, just not absolutely debilitating, but they're really annoying, and the boobs, and it could just be some quite simple tweaks as to what's going on, or it could be just adding in some different foods at particular times of the month, just to help with clearing some of that estrogen. So maybe up your cruciferous vegetables, Michelle.
Eat more
Particularly
broccoli.
from Eat more broccoli from ovulation onwards.
I love that. Thank you so
There you
much.
go.
Well,
My final
yeah.
remark. Eat more broccoli, ladies.
I love it. Well, I will definitely put all the links that you shared in the show notes. And everybody, please follow Liz. She's amazing. And thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you, Michelle.
Bye.
Bye.